Now, work-life balance is an interesting thing. And it's interesting because it seems that everyone wants it, but no one seems to have it. But my research around work-life balance came from the most unlikely of places, the world of elite sport. And it started with an interaction with this woman. This is Kerry Pottast. She won the gold medal in the beach volleyball 2000 Olympics. Now, the interesting thing about this game is they're playing the Brazilians, who are the favourites. The Aussies aren't expected to win, but they win the first set. And then it is 10-all in the second set. And if the Aussies can win 2 points in a row, they're going to take home the gold medal. But they can't close it out. They win one, we win one, they win one, we win one. And the tension is rising and rising. Finally, they hand Kerry the ball. She serves an ace. And then she serves a serve they can't get back into play. She wins them the gold medal. Now, I interviewed Kerry and I said, Kerry, how do you handle that pressure? How do you not buckle at that moment? And what she said to me was profound. She said, Adam, once you're in the point, you are fine. She said the hard part about sport is getting to the point. She said, see that gap in between points? That is where you bring yourself undone. That is where you start to worry about the outcome, not execution. That is where you start to overthink. You let fear take over. You start to doubt your preparation. She said that all occurs in the gaps. And what she did was this routine, that a moment a point would finish, she'd go into this routine to keep her mind on the present moment and control emotion. She said to me, the champions manage the gaps. And I thought, I've never heard that before, but it's profound. Now, the second interaction was with a guy called Jim Lua. Jim is a researcher from the US and he studies elite tennis players. And I went and saw one of his lectures. And he said in this lecture, if you take the top 100 male tennis players and compare them to each other, he said they're virtually identical. They all hit the ball as hard, they run as fast, they're as accurate as each other. He said, however, where the elite players stand out is not what they do during the point, but what they do in between the points. What Jim showed is the elite players could lose a point and get over it really fast. They make a mistake, they drop that baggage, they move into the next point, they show up clean. Whereas the lower-ranked players carry that baggage with them and beat themselves up over that mistake. What he also showed is the elite players in between points relaxed more. Their heart rate dropped more, blood pressure, stress hormones. They use that gap to relax and recover. Now, the lower-ranked players stayed agitated. Now, that doesn't make a difference over a game, but over 5 sets, that makes a massive difference. And the last thing Jim showed is as they moved into that point, all they thought about was that moment in time and nothing else. They're completely engaged and present in that point. What Jim showed is it wasn't what the elite players did during the point, but rather what they did in between the points. But the third interaction that cemented I started to explore work-life balance was an interaction with a CEO. So I was running a leadership day with a CEO and his executive team. And at the end of the day, he said to me, what are you doing after this? And I said, well, sitting in my hotel room by myself, like, welcome to my life. And he said, would you like to come over for dinner? And I was like, dude, I'd love to come over for dinner. So I went to this guy's house and I'm sitting around the dinner table with him and his family. But what struck me about this guy is he was patient, present, relaxed, fun, funny. And I'm watching him going, man, that's how I want to be when I come home. And as he walks me out of the house, I said, look, I hope this is not inappropriate, but I have to ask you, how do you go from psycho businessman to super dad? How do you do that? And he said, well, it's all down to my third space. And I'm thinking, third space? What's a third space? He said, Adam, I realized that my work has a rhythm to it. And that rhythm looks like this. He said, that's work. He says, but my home life has a rhythm that's more like that. It is slower, more nurturing, more supportive, less about KPIs, P&Ls, and board papers. He said, it's not that work's bad, home's good. It's just that they're different and they require me to be different. And he then actually, I drew this for a group recently, drew this on the flip chart. And it was a big conference, about 1,000 people. I finished the presentation, everyone left. I walk over to my computer, I start shutting it down. I look up and there's a guy standing side of stage staring at me. He's just watching me pack up my computer. And I'm thinking, does this go and talk to me? And he comes up on stage and he goes, what if that's home? And that's work. He said to me, I go to work to relax. So we're not saying one's good, one's bad. We're saying they're different. And this CEO said to me, he said, here's my challenge. He said, I work long hours and I feel guilty about that. So I race home at the end of the day, but I drag the mindset of the day home with me. He said, I walk in the door, I'm finishing my wife's sentences because she doesn't talk fast enough. I'm yelling at my kids because they're not efficient with the time that they have available to them. He said, I try and run my home like I run my office. And he said, one day I opened the door of the house. And as I stepped in, he said, you wouldn't believe it, I caught a glimpse of the kids as they ran around the corner of the kitchen and out the backyard. He said, they heard me come home and they took off. He said, I stood in that doorway, devastated. And I'm thinking, what kind of father comes home and the kids don't want to see them? And he said, I can't even tell you how long I stood there for. And I walked into my room and I sat down and I started to think, what just happened? And he said, what I realized is I was like this angry hurricane that just tears through the house. Criticizing my partner about the state of the house, yelling at my kids about their rooms, and I leave this trail of destruction behind me. He said, then I discovered a third space. And he said, this is where I changed my mindset from the busy day to a mindset that will suit my home. Now, what he did was highly impractical. He built a new entrance into his home. That's what you do, yeah. And I looked at him and I said, well, you did what? And he goes, I'll show you, it's easier. So he grabs me by the arm, pulls me back inside the house. He says, follow me. We go down this set of stairs into the garage. He goes into the garage, walks up to this door. He goes, Ads, see this door? Goes straight to my bedroom. He said, mate, I park the car in the garage. I get out of the car. I go through the door into my bedroom. I'm not allowed to talk to anyone in the family. I'm off limits. I go into my room, I take off my suit, I have a shower, I put on casual clothes. He said, then I do a 2-minute relaxation exercise just to relax me and unwind me. He said, then I go greet the family. And he said, I lose 15 minutes, but the mindset I'm in is so worth it. He said, this is the most important thing I do in my day. Now, I looked at him and said, thanks for that. Not sure if I have the cash flow to build a new entrance into my house. He said, Adam, you've missed the point. The third space can be anything. Drive home, ferry ride, bus ride, walk the dog, go to the gym. He said, it's just a space where you think about, how will I show up when I walk through that door? He said, because how you show up determines what sort of evening you have. You're in a good mood, they're in a good mood. You're in a bad one, they're in a bad one. He said, even if you live on your own, how you transition home determines whether you unwind, relax, socialise, or obsess and worry about the day. He said, it's all about the transition. Now, I walked away from this going, my gosh, I'm not building a new entrance, but I've never thought, how do I show up when I walk through that door? And I started to play around with it. Now, my third space revolves around my dog, Tilly. Now, Tills is 18 kilos of pure love. And when I finish work, I grab Tills, I put my 2 daughters in the pram, we go for a walk to the dog park. My wife gets an hour to herself. I think she just drinks alcohol on the lounge. We come back, she's in such a good mood, something's going on. Anyway, we go down the dog park. We've got like a dad's group that's formed down there where I would describe it, we are idiots for 45 minutes. We run around with the kids and the dogs and we're playful. Now I come home and like many people probably in this room, I work of an evening. I run 2 businesses, it's the reality of my world. But when I walk through that door for the next 2 hours, I'm super dad. And it's all about how do I have the best connection with my wife and my kids. This thing gets put in a drawer at the door, because if it's in my pocket, I'll look at it. And the next 2 hours are just how do I connect? How do I be fun? But it's the setup that allows me to be that guy. And it was driven home to me how important it was because I stopped doing it. Tills had to have an operation, and the vet said to me, you can't walk her for 7 days, she has to stay in the yard. And I thought, I'm not going to a dog park without a dog. So I stayed at home and I work right up till dinner. I sit down with my family at the dinner table. My wife's talking to me. What am I doing? Checking my email on my phone under the table. Like she can't tell I'm looking at my phone. Yeah, she's talking to me. I'm not hearing the words because I'm thinking about work. I've got to do this proposal. I've got to do that. I'm in work mode. And I looked at my kids as a to-do list item. It was like, I'll feed that one, bath that one. It was about how do I get them out of the way so I can get back to work? It was a disaster. Not only for me, but also for Tilly. She went from this happy staffy to this depressed dog. You know, on day 5, we went out shopping, walked in the house to find this. You know, she turned to alcohol. It was tragic. Now, in my introduction, what you heard about me is all my work's around high performance. So how do we be more resilient? How do we make workplaces more efficient and people be happy? But I started to throw this story into my presentations. But when people came up to talk to me after the presentation, they didn't want to talk about resilience and engagement. They wanted to talk about that. People came up and went, oh my gosh, I am the hurricane. Or I find it so hard to turn off at the end of the day. Or I give everything to work and I walk through that door, I got nothing left. What people talked about was this pain. And people kept emailing me going, I tried your third space. Here's what I do. People sent me pictures. And the phrase they kept using was work-life balance. They said, when I do the third space, I feel that I have more work-life balance. And I thought, I wonder if what we do between work and home affects work-life balance. So I called John Molyneux from Deakin University and I said, John, do you want to partner on this research? And he said, oh yeah, for sure, that sounds great. So we started to do it. Now, I did something different to most of the research that was out there. First thing I did is I interviewed people about balance. So I said to people, what does balance mean to you? Because most people hate that word. I said, but why would you want balance? Top 2 responses was to be happy and to have better relationships. And I thought, that's interesting, because most of the research talked about time. It was all about time management and being effective with your time. Then you'll have balance. But I thought that's more about behaviour than it is about time. And the second thing I did, which I couldn't find many other researchers who had done it, I interviewed families about balance. Because usually we focus on the individual. I interviewed families. And I said to people, if your mum, dad, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, partner had balance, what does that look like? So if they're balanced, tell me about your world. Most interesting question I've ever asked a group. They didn't talk about time. Well, actually, they did. Here's what they said. Family said, we get the emails and we get the phone calls. Like, we get that that's part of your job now. What we don't get is you come through that door and you're a jerk. That's what we don't get. They said, you come through that door and take your day out on us. You walk through that door, see us as an inconvenience that gets in the way of your work. What family said balance would look like is come home in a good mood and engage with us. And they said properly engage with us. And we thought, how do we facilitate that? How do we help people do it? And we spent 3 years researching it and we came up with the magic formula. And this is it. We asked 600 senior business people to practice these 3 steps in the transition between work and home. Step number 1 was called reflect. And this is where we asked people to think about their day. Now, when you ask a group of people to reflect on their day, what do they focus on? All the bad stuff. What they didn't do, what mistakes they'd made. So, we changed our research slightly. What people did is articulated the answer to these 3 questions. What went well? What did I achieve? How did I get better? We got these 3 questions from the military when we were working with them, when they debrief an activity. But what we found is when people answer these 3 questions, they get a burst of happiness and also a business outcome. Because every day they're going, what did I do today that got a great outcome, which increased their consciousness of that behaviour, which increased their chance of doing it tomorrow. The next phase is called rest. And this is where we ask people to do something that made them still and present, something that relaxed them and focused their mind on one thing. Now, this could be anything. Some people said Sudoku on the bus, reading a book on the train, listening to music in my car. What we found, number 1 thing was exercise because of the chemical changes in the brain, but also shopping and socialization was high on the list too. But the last phase was called reset, where we asked people to think about how will you show up when you walk through that door. Specifically, what's your intention? And how do you need to behave to get that intention? We are 600 senior business people and small business owners to practice these 3 steps between work and home for 1 month. We measured lots of things, but one of the things we measured was mood in the home. And after practicing this for 1 month, we saw a 41% improvement in mood in the home. 41%. We showed that family dynamics improve, and regardless of how bad your day is, you practice these 3 steps, you show up better. What we know is this has a dramatic increase on family, how functional they are. Now, this is an impressive stat, but it's a cold statistic, isn't it? And my favorite TED Talk is Brené Brown. And she says the most elegant line I've ever heard. And that is that stories are data with a soul. Let me tell you about a story that has lots of soul. I was working with a large telco, and we were doing some work with senior leaders, and we do this long-term program that lasts for 12 months, but we teach them the third space as part of the program. And one of the guys in that group, a guy called Keith, Scottish guy, like cracking human being, great guy. And we lined up to catch up and talk about business, and we sat down for lunch, and he says, Adam, before we get into business, can I just tell you something about the third space? I said, for sure. He said, after your presentation, I went home and I walked in the door and I saw my 17-year-old son. And he said, I see him and I'm at him. I'm picking on him about his room and his homework. Have you done this? Have you done that? And then you came into my head and I went, oh my gosh, that's how I show up every day, as that guy. That's how I treat him. And he said, my son's a beautiful kid, like beautiful. And he said, I started to think about our relationship and I reflected on it. And he was always a really affectionate kid. Like even as a 15-year-old boy would come up, give me a hug, give me a kiss. You know, I'd be lying on the lounge, he'd lie down next to me. He said, well, what I realized is that had stopped for 2 years. And it's of course I show up as that guy. And he said, the next day I came home and I walked in the house and I saw him. And I thought, who cares if his room's a mess? Like, I want to talk to him. I want to understand what's happening at school. How is he feeling? And he said, I started to connect with him. And Keith's just like, he's a macho, well-built guy. And he sat there and his voice starts to go funny. And then these tears start rolling down his face. And he said, this is really hard to talk about. But for the first time in 2 years, he came up and gave me the first cuddle. And he said, it's because I showed up as a different guy. This is my gift to you today. What we know is this works. What we learnt from our research about work-life balance, it's not when you show up, it's how you show up. They say there's two types of people in life. The type of person that lights up a room when they walk in, and the type of person that lights up a room when they walk out. How will you use the third space to light up more rooms? Thank you very much. Thank you.